Hi everybody, good evening. Thank you for inviting me to speak a little bit about my research tonight. Okay, I'm Alyson Andrade, okay, Professor Alyson Andrade, and this is the Professor Márcio Leitão. Márcio Leitão worked with me to develop this research at Paraíba, João Pessoa City, in João Pessoa at UFPB University. Okay, he still is the coordinator. Okay, the guy who leads the research in the LAPRO, the processing laboratory of cognition, of when we can realize some experiments in the experimental linguistics. Okay, so if you have any doubt, any curious about this subject, you can write for us. Okay, but the subject tonight is about the linguistic processing of the relative pronoun that by Brazilian learners of English as L2. Okay, when we thought about this research, the first thing was to find one structure that it would be different from Portuguese to English. Okay, we would like to find people who study English as second language or foreign language, depending on the level of proficiency. Okay, and we find some students, universities or English courses that study English as a second language in different levels, and the problem was to find a structure to make this comparison. Sometimes one structure that acts sometimes in Portuguese in one way and in another way in English. Okay, and we find the structure relative pronoun that. Okay, this is the Professor Márcio Leitão. He's a professor at the Universidade Federal da Paraíba, Paraíba Federal University, and me. When we developed this research, I was studying there. Okay, he was my coordinator, the person that helped me to develop this research. Okay, and this is me, Professor Alyson. Okay, good. Here I have always to show these institutions because they support us to develop this research. Okay, the university, the CNPq was a kind of sponsor. Okay, I had the financial support to develop the research in the LAPRO. LAPRO is the Linguistic Processing Laboratory, coordinated by Professor Márcio, and the ProLing. ProLing is a part of the university, it's the department, okay, the Language or Linguistic Department program. Okay, let's go. So, our first purpose, or the purpose of this research, is to investigate the influence from L1 over the L2 processing in a group of Brazilian learners of English. Our theory, our hypothesis is that our brain, we call like parser is the processor, okay? Is some entity, it's some device we have in our brain used to process some sentences when we read it, okay? Or when we listen it. So when we receive some input, when we listen or when we read some information in some place, this input is processed by this parser, okay? And what we want to know, we want to discover, okay, or at least observate, is how this L1 parser, this parser processes L1, and how it behaves when it processes L2. Is it the same strategy to a Brazilian process Portuguese, and to a Brazilian process the second language or a foreign language like English in the basic, intermediate, and advanced levels of proficiencies, or no? Is there any difference between the processing of L1 and the processing of L2? And even in the L2 processing, the different levels could be irrelevant or no, or not. Okay? So we are trying to discuss something about those questions. Okay? We know that it's very difficult to find a precise answer to say, is this or is that? Okay, it's difficult in science to say that, to be precise, but sometimes we find some indications when we get some results. Okay, so we are going to look for indications, indicatives. Okay, but our main hypothesis for this work is that the L1 is going to influence or to cause some interference when you are processing your L2 English. For example, we have cases where in English we know that the adjective comes first. For example, a person says, tall boy. English, first we have the adjective, the modifier, and after we have the head word. Okay, the noun of this NP. Okay, so in Portuguese it's a bit different. Usually in Portuguese we have a different position. We have first the noun, and after the adjective, the modifier qualifying the noun. Okay, so in Portuguese we would say like garoto, alto. It would be the most common in Portuguese. So we can perceive that the structure is different. So we looked for a situation similar to that, when the processing would be different. The structure would be different, okay? It would behave different from the first language. So, to build those experiments, we developed 10 pairs of sentences which permit us to compare how languages with different backgrounds are processed in the mind of Brazilian native learners or speakers of L2. Okay? So we created 20 sentences to be tested, to be experimented. Okay? 10 pairs of sentences. Okay? But our goal is to observe when Brazilians that are usually how can I say, frequently process the relative pronoun que, similar to that in English. In Portuguese, is obligated to have this relative pronoun in this sentence. But in English, it's optional. You can put it or you can't. You have the same translation, the same meaning, you are going to understand normally. Okay? But if in Portuguese is obligated, a Brazilian native has to process in English, and when this sentence, we don't have the that explicit in the sentence. So it would be difficult to process. This Brazilian learner of English, L2, would spend more time to process it, if he or she spent more time to process this structure that is not common in Portuguese, it's L1, probably we have some effect of interference or influence from L1 over to L2. Okay? So let's see the model of the sentence. Okay, here we have 20 sentences like those. 10 using the relative pronoun that, and 10 without the relative pronoun that. Okay? We have to remember that all the sentences have the same size, the same number of words, okay, or segments, and all the words have the same number of letters. Okay? Okay? It's important to make this control, to observe more clearly the results at the end of the research. Okay? So, explaining again, when a Brazilian processes the sentence 1A, it would be easier because we have that, similar to the relative pronoun in Portuguese, que. So we would have the same structure. So it would be easier because the Brazilian would use the same strategy to process L1. It will work in the process of L2 because the structure would be very similar. But when we don't have that, this situation, it would be wrong in Portuguese, but not in English. It's optional. Both are correct. Okay? So, in Portuguese, we have the same case of 1A. A bebida que Mike compra na praia é ótimo, é deliciosa, or is delicious. Okay? This is correct, but this situation in Portuguese, similar to 1B in English, is totally incorrect. Okay? Because the relative pronoun that or que, it's obligated in Portuguese. We don't have this option of implicit that. It's not correct in Portuguese. Okay? So we are going to test sentences, similar sentences like those. Brazilian processing these sentences with that, and Brazilian learners processing sentences without that. And we are going to compare the times in these segments, okay? The computer is going to record the time in milliseconds, and we are going to compare the time here and here, and after here and here, to see if there is a more difficult in the spending time or not. Okay? Good. Okay. All sentences had same size and syntactic structure, the same number of words, and each word had the same number of letters. What I have said to you. Okay? It's a strategy to control the results at the end of the experiment. Okay? So we had in a total 20 experimental sentences added to 40 fake or non-experimental sentences. So we had in a total 60 sentences. Okay? We make a mix those sentences with those, this sentence with those, sorry, to height, okay, to height of the participants or the volunteers, too difficult to them to decipher what we want, okay, to hide the effect of what we want to research to get them, okay. So this is a Latin square, is one strategy to make the mixture of the sentence, because it's very important that each volunteer read different sentences. So it's not so good for the experiment if you repeat the same sentences. So one volunteer don't read the same sentence with and without that. No, they have to read sentences with that and without that, but not the same. Okay, because we are going to make a mixture using those sentences. So our hypothesis was which sentences with explicit that would be read faster, because it would imitate the Portuguese processing strategies used by the brain to process the L1, the parser. Okay? We have to consider which the relative pronoun que or that in English must be expressed in the sentence, or it would be considered syntactically ungrammatical. Wrong. Okay? Good. Here we have the institutions that help me to invite some participants. So all of the participants we found from those institutions. So I have to say thank you to CCA, Juazeiro and Crato City, IASG, English courses, CCA and IASG are English courses. Una Vida is a college at Campina Grande, Paraíba. Universidade Regional do Cariri, URCA, é de Ceará, Crato, e Universidade Federal da Paraíba, na Paraíba, João Pessoa. Okay? So we had students, volunteers from English courses and from some universities. Okay? Graduated students. Good. To classify the different proficiency levels among the participants, we made the application of the author placement test. Okay, we found 29 students, but we had a problem because we really didn't know the levels. We could ask them, what is your level? Are you elementary student of English? Are you intermediate or are you advanced? But it's not secure. we have to test. So we find that David Allen's test 2004, the Oxford Placement Test. It's a very, very good test for identify levels of proficiency. Okay, so they had two texts. The Oxford Placement Test is divided into two phases. First, the grammar test, when you have to answer some questions about grammar, rules, okay, 100 questions, and more 100, and in this case, 100 questions about listening test. So you listen to the audio and answer the question about that audio. Okay, so in a total we had 200 questions for each participant. Okay, so from this moment on, we could identify 10 participants as basic group, 10 participants as intermediate group, and only 9 volunteers from advanced group. It's very difficult to find advanced people, so it was possible to do the experiment with only 9. Okay, this is a chart or a table that Oxford Placement Test showed us to make the classification. So we have a score here between 0 and 23. The group was in the elementary phase. 24 until 40, we are in the intermediate phase, and 48 to 60, we are in the group of the advanced. So we can divide clearly those groups of participants. Okay. After the first step, this first experiment, this first exam of proficiency level, we are going to make the real experiment. Okay, self-paced reading. The participants should read sentences in the computer, in a MacBook. Okay, like this. And the software that we have used was PSYCHOLINGUISTICS. Okay, the Cohen McQueenie Flat Provost 1993. The software was developed only for Macs, so we can't use it in a computer with Microsoft, for example. Okay, so we use the software PSYCHOLIGUISTICS and the Mac book. Okay, so we took those sentences. Let me return. Okay, we took all the sentences, the set of sentences, and we break in segments, in parts. And the person, the volunteer, would read the sentence only seeing the segments. And we give some information to use 2 buttons. Okay, one button to pass the segments, to go ahead, and 2 buttons to answer a question at the end. Only to check if the participant was paying attention or not in that experiment. Okay, so the beginning of the experiment is like that. You are sat in front of the computer alone in a silent class. Okay, to have total concentration, and we give the information that you have to pass the segments as fast as possible, but in your real time, your normal time, not so slow, not so fast. Okay, so this is the beginning, the start point. Okay, you have a cross, and you are going to press in the key and see something like that. The sentence in the computer. Let's see. Okay, one important information. Each segment read of those is we record the time in milliseconds. Okay, the computer is going to record each segment of each press, and after that we are going to have a summary, a paper, a result, okay, in the program. Okay, and we are going to analyze the times of each segment we are interested in. In this case, the red segments. Okay, to see if with that is more slower, or without that is less slow. Okay, that's it. So we are going to read the sentence in segments like this. The drink that Mike buys at the beach is delicious. So at the end of the sentence, you have a question. Right? The question is only to observe, to register if the participant is really serious about this experiment, or only press button to finish very fast. Okay? Good. So at the end of the sentence you have to say yes or no, and using your answer we can perceive if you were paying attention or not in that moment. Okay? And we have a random. Sometimes you read sentences with that, sometimes you read sentences without that. Okay? And some fake sentences too, to become impossible to identify what we want to get from the participants. Okay? Good. So, the second sentence. The drink that Mike buys at the beach is delicious. Okay? So, until the end you have 60 sentences to read like that. Okay? And answer a question at the end all the time. Well, after this experiment with 29 students, we had some data in the computer so we can analyze. Márcio Leitão helped me a lot with this part with calculus, mathematics, statistics, very complicated, and he helped me a lot to solve this data. Okay, he was responsible for this part. Great. So, as a result, let's see if the structures with that were read easiest. Were they easiest to read very fast or not? Not so easiest. Okay, so the first result was for the first segment in red. The advanced group has processed faster than the elementary group. So we can perceive here that the proficiency level is relevant. So if you are in the advanced group, you have a better ability to read faster. So if your level is high, we can conclude, or we can indicate that the proficiency level, how can I say, don't permit that the L1 strategy influence on your L2 processing. Okay, good. Second result, these structures with explicit that were processed faster than the sentence without it. So it seems that when we have a that explicit in the sentence, it's similar to the relative pronoun que in Portuguese. So our parser would use the same strategy from L1 over the L2, okay? To process L2 data. Because in relation to all times, the structures without that spent more time to be processed, indicating some difficulty when the person or the parser is reading that part without that. So, okay, maybe it could be difficult to make a constituent there. Okay. Oops, 1, 2. The number is incorrect. Okay, 4. The sentences with that were read faster by the group 3 of volunteers, even on the post-critical segment. Okay, so in the first way we looked for a result in the first segment, that, or in the sentences where we don't have that, the next. Okay, but when we start analyzing the results, the next segment, okay, we call like spillover effect, showed us important and curious data too, and we are going to analyze. Okay, so the sentences with that were read faster by the group 3, by the 3 groups, sorry, of volunteers, even the post-critical. So again, we have another information. In a second time, twice, in a new segment, we have a result that when we have the relative pronoun that, similar to Portuguese, the volunteers read faster. Okay, so it would be we can indicate that is very strong, this hypothesis that the L1 influences the L2. Okay? The advanced group was faster than the intermediate, and the intermediate was faster than the elementary. A second problem is that, a second question is that if you have a higher level of proficiency, this influence from L1 is less, okay? Because the elementary read very slowly, the sentences with that and without that. The intermediate group read faster than the elementary, and the advanced read faster than the intermediate. So the level of proficiency don't permit some influence from L1 over L2, okay? So, we believe that the L1 strategy used by the parser or syntactic processor influences in the L2 processing, and the influence is strong if the level is elementary, because high levels do not suffer much influence from L1. So, two questions. We got as our results that the structures that are similar to the Portuguese structures were written in very easy for base, elementary, intermediate, and advanced. So it suggests that maybe the L1 strategy was used to process the L2 data. Okay? And second, if you have a shallow level of proficiency, elementary level of proficiency, you spend more time. Okay? If you have an advanced level of proficiency, you read very faster, okay, than the other levels, because the language is very independent, okay, and don't permit some influence from anyone, okay, in L2. So these are the results. So our hypothesis, we had in this experiment strong evidence that we are finding or observing good results.